I was standing in my trailer on set when I heard the sound of heaven's gates closing, not shutting gently but slamming with a finality that made my entire body go cold. It was 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, and I'd just woken up from what I thought was a nightmare, but then Jesus appeared at the foot of my bed, and I realized this wasn't a dream. He was about to show me the exact moment when heaven would close its doors forever, and the reason why had nothing to do with what I'd been taught in church. What I witnessed in that vision, the specific moment heaven's gates closed, and WHO was left outside screaming to get in, will shake every comfortable belief you have about salvation and readiness. Before we begin, tell me one thing you're praying for right now in the comments. I want to pray with you by name. And if you're a true believer in Christ, if you've genuinely repented, if you have saving faith, if you're truly following Jesus, please subscribe. What you're about to hear will challenge everything you've been taught about readiness. I need to know there are believers out there who are awake, watching, and ready. So, let me take you back to that night. I'd been filming scenes for The Chosen all week, and honestly, I was exhausted. Playing Jesus on camera it's an honor, but it's also this constant reminder of how far I fall short, you know? I'd wrapped late, gotten back to my trailer around midnight, and crashed hard. At 51, those long days hit different than they used to. But then I woke up bolt upright at exactly 3:47 a.m., and I knew something was different. The air in my trailer felt heavy, like pressure building before a storm. My heart was already pounding, and I hadn't even seen anything yet. I reached for my phone to check the time, and that's when I saw him. Jesus was standing at the foot of my bed. Not the Jesus I portray on screen, not the gentle, soft-spoken version we've created for television. This was Jesus, in his full glory and authority, and I'm telling you, my first instinct was to fall off the bed and hide my face. The light coming from him wasn't harsh, but it was penetrating, like it was exposing everything about me all at once. "Jonathan," he said, and his voice was both tender and terrifying. "You've been asking me about the end, about readiness, about who will enter when the door closes." I had been asking that for weeks, actually. Every time I put on that costume, every time I delivered lines about watching and being ready, I'd been praying, "Lord, show me what this really means. Show me what you're actually looking for." "Tonight," Jesus continued, "I'm going to show you something the church has gotten devastatingly wrong. What you're about to see will break your heart, but you need to see it. They need to see it." And just like that, I wasn't in my trailer anymore. I could still feel the bed beneath me, could still smell the faint scent of coffee from earlier, but I was also somewhere else entirely. I was standing outside massive gates, and I knew immediately these were heaven's gates. They were still open, but barely. Maybe 3 feet of space remained between those enormous doors. The scene before me was chaos. Thousands, no, millions of people were rushing toward those gates, and here's what made my blood run cold. Most of them were wearing crosses. I could see them clearly. Expensive jewelry with crucifixes, WWJD bracelets, T-shirts with Christian slogans. One woman near the front was clutching a Bible that looked like it had been read 1,000 times, the cover worn smooth from years of handling. "Lord," I whispered, my voice shaking, "these are your people. These are Christians. Why are they?" "Watch," he said simply. The gates began to close, slowly, deliberately, and the sound, oh God, the sound, it was like the universe itself was groaning. People started pushing, shoving, screaming to get through that narrowing gap, but here's what I couldn't understand. There were angels at the gates, and they weren't letting people through. They were examining them, one by one, and person after person was being turned away. A man in an expensive suit pushed to the front. He was probably in his 60s, had that distinguished look about him, the kind of man who commanded respect in a room. "I'm Pastor Williams," he shouted at the angels. "I've served for 38 years. I built a church of 15,000 members. I've preached to millions. You know who I am." The angel looked at him with something like sorrow and said, "The master says he never knew you." "That's impossible," the pastor shouted back. "I preached his word every Sunday. I led thousands to pray the sinner's prayer. But the angel just shook his head and gestured for him to step aside. The man fell to his knees, his face a mask of disbelief and terror as the gates continued to close. A woman pushed forward next, young, maybe early 30s. "Wait, I taught Sunday school for 10 years. I was baptized. I went on mission trips. I gave 10% of everything I made." Same response. "The master says he never knew you." I felt like I couldn't breathe. Jesus was standing next to me now. and I could feel waves of grief coming from him. Not anger grief. Deep, aching grief. I don't understand, I said, and I was crying now, tears streaming down my face. These people did everything right. They went to church, they served, they believed in you. How can you say you never knew them? Jesus turned to me, and his eyes were full of tears too. Jonathan, did they do everything right? Or did they do everything the church told them was right? Before I could answer, another figure pushed through the crowd. This one I recognized, or at least I recognized the type. She was wearing a modest dress, had a prayer shawl draped over her shoulders, and was carrying not one but 3 different study Bibles, all marked up with highlights and notes. Lord, she called out, I studied your word every single day. I memorized entire books of the Bible. I can recite all of Romans. I attended every Bible study, every prayer meeting, every church service. I corrected people when they got doctrine wrong. I defended the faith. The angel didn't even hesitate. The master says he never knew you. But I knew about him, she screamed. I knew everything about him. And that's when Jesus spoke, and his words went through me like a knife. She knew about me, but she never knew me. She studied my words, but never heard my voice. She learned my teachings, but never let them change her heart. She defended her doctrine of me while ignoring the least of these I called her to serve. She was so busy being right about me that she never let me be Lord over her. I was trembling now, violently, because, isn't that what we're supposed to do? Study the Bible, learn doctrine, defend the faith. That's what every church I've ever attended taught. That's what makes someone a good Christian, right? Keep watching, Jesus said quietly. The gates were narrowing further now, maybe 18 inches of space left. The desperation in the crowd was palpable. People were screaming, weeping, tearing at their clothes, and I noticed something that made everything worse. In the distance, beyond the crowd, there were other people, quieter people. They weren't pushing or shouting. They were simply walking toward the gates with a calm I couldn't understand, given the chaos. One of them reached the front, an older man, probably in his 70s, wearing simple clothes that had been mended several times. His hands were rough, calloused from hard work. He didn't say anything to the angel, just stood there quietly, and the angel smiled, actually smiled, and stepped aside to let him pass. Wait, I said to Jesus. Who is he? Why did he get in when the pastor didn't? When the Bible scholar didn't? Because I know him, Jesus said simply. We talk, every day. When his coworker was struggling, he gave half his paycheck away. Didn't tell anyone, didn't post about it, just did it. When his neighbor's daughter was dying, he sat with that family for 3 days straight, just being present in their grief. He's never preached a sermon, doesn't know Greek or Hebrew, can barely quote scripture from memory, but he knows my voice, and he does what I say. We have a relationship, Jonathan, not a religion. Another person approached the gates, a woman who looked like she'd been through hell. Track marks on her arms, clothes that had seen better days, face worn by years of hard living. She didn't even look up at the angel, just whispered, I don't deserve to be here. I finally learned to love him more than the drugs. I finally let him change me. Even if it's too late, I just want him to know I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. The angel's face transformed with joy. The master has been waiting for you. He says to tell you he's proud of you, and he's been saving your seat. And he ushered her through quickly, before the gates closed further. I lost it then, completely broke down, because what Jesus was showing me went against everything I thought I knew about salvation, about what makes someone ready, about what he actually values. The church has taught them that knowing about me is the same as knowing me, Jesus said, and his voice was thick with emotion. They've taught them that correct theology matters more than transformed hearts, that defending doctrine is more important than demonstrating love, that saying the right prayer, attending the right church, believing the right things, that these external markers are what I'm looking for. But Jonathan, I'm not looking for people who know about me. I'm looking for people who know me, who hear my voice, who let me transform them from the inside out. The gates were closing faster now, maybe 6 inches left. The screaming had reached a fever pitch, and I saw so many more youth pastors who'd run successful programs but never actually discipled anyone. Worship leaders who'd sung beautiful songs but lived for applause rather than for God. Prophets and teachers who'd had the right words but wrong hearts. missionaries who'd counted conversions but never actually loved the people they served. And then I saw something that made me physically ill. A group of people near the front, all wearing staff badges from various megachurches. They were arguing with the angels, citing their credentials, their accomplishments, their platforms. We reached millions. They were saying, "We grew churches. We wrote books. We have online followings." And Jesus just shook his head slowly. "They built kingdoms, but not my kingdom. They made names for themselves. But they never made my name known through their lives. They performed Christianity beautifully, but they never let me perform transformation in them." The gates were down to 3 inches now. The sound of them closing was deafening, and that's when I saw something that would haunt me for days afterward. A woman broke through the crowd, middle-aged, nicely dressed, that look of someone who'd lived a good, comfortable Christian life. She reached the angel and said, with absolute confidence, "I prayed the prayer. When I was 12 years old, I accepted Jesus into my heart at Vacation Bible School. I'm saved. You have to let me in. Once saved, always saved." The angel looked at her with infinite sadness. "Did he save you? Or did you say magic words and then live however you wanted? Did his salvation transform you? Or did you just take out fire insurance and go back to building your own kingdom?" "I went to church," she protested. "Sometimes, when it was convenient. I gave money, when I had extra. I was a good person. I never killed anyone or did anything really bad." But the gates were closing. 2 inches now. Jesus turned to me, and I could barely look at him because I knew he was about to ask me something I didn't want to answer. "Jonathan, you play me on screen. You speak my words. You inspire millions with stories of my life. But do you know me? Or do you just know about me? When those gates close, when that final moment comes, will I know you?" And I couldn't answer, because honestly, I didn't know. I thought I did. I thought playing Jesus, studying his life, learning his teachings, I thought that meant something. But what he was showing me in that moment made me question everything. The gates were 1 inch apart now. The sound built to a crescendo. And then, with a final, terrible, eternal boom, they slammed shut. The screaming that followed, I can't even describe it. It wasn't just the sound of disappointment or even grief. It was the sound of people realizing too late that they'd gotten everything wrong. That all their Christian activity, all their religious performance, all their knowledge about God had meant nothing because they'd never actually known him. They'd never let him truly transform them. They'd never developed a real relationship with him. I was back in my trailer then, gasping for air, my pillow soaked with tears. But Jesus was still there, still standing at the foot of my bed. The weight of what I'd seen was crushing me. "Why?" I managed to choke out. "Why did you show me this? And when? When does this happen?" Jesus looked at me with such love and such sorrow that I thought my heart would break. "I showed you this because my church is teaching people the wrong things. They're teaching them that external religion saves, that knowing about me is enough, that saying the right words, believing the right doctrines, attending the right services, that these things make someone ready. But Jonathan, I'm not looking for people who perform Christianity. I'm looking for people I know, people who know me, people who hear my voice and follow it, even when it costs them everything." "But when?" I asked again. "When do the gates close?" What he told me next made everything even more terrifying, because it wasn't what I expected at all. Jesus sat down on the edge of my bed, actually sat down like we were just two people having a conversation, except one of us was the creator of the universe, and I was still trying to process what I'd just witnessed. "The gates don't close once," he said quietly. "They close every single day, every single moment, for every single person." I just stared at him, trying to understand what he meant. "Jonathan, you're thinking about the end times, about some future moment when heaven's gates literally slam shut and that's it, game over. But what I showed you, that's happening right now. Every day people are living as if they have unlimited time to develop a real relationship with me. They think salvation is a one-time transaction, say the prayer, check the box, you're in. But what they don't understand is that the door closes when their heart becomes so hard, so comfortable in their religious performance, that they can no longer hear my voice at all." He paused, and I could see the weight of what he was about to show me in his eyes. "I need to show you more. I need you to see how this happens. How people who genuinely believe they're following me actually walk away from me every single day without even realizing it." And just like that, I was in another vision. But this time, I wasn't standing outside heaven's gates. I was in a church, a massive, beautiful church with state-of-the-art sound systems, professional lighting, and seats that probably cost more than my first car. The worship band was incredible. I mean, honestly, they could have been on tour. The production value was something you'd see at a concert venue. I was invisible in this vision, just observing. The place was packed, maybe 3,000 people, all singing along, hands raised, looking every bit like devoted worshipers. And then Jesus appeared next to me, and I realized he was watching too. "What do you see?" he asked me. I see. I see people worshiping you," I said, though something in his tone made me hesitant. "Look closer. Look at their hearts." And then, I don't know how to explain this, but it was like I could suddenly see beneath the surface. I could see what was really going on inside these people as they sang and swayed and looked so engaged. The woman in the third row, hands raised high, tears streaming down her face, I could see her thoughts. She was thinking about how moved she looked, wondering if the people around her noticed her deep worship, planning to post about this powerful moment with God later with just the right filter and caption to get maximum engagement. The man leading worship, voice soaring beautifully, I could see his heart. He was counting the crowd, doing mental calculations about whether this turnout would impress the megachurch pastor who was considering hiring him, already imagining his name on a bigger stage. 2 rows back, a couple held hands, looking like the perfect Christian family. But I could see the bitterness between them, the unresolved fights, the way they performed unity on Sundays while barely speaking the rest of the week. They were both thinking about how good they looked together, how people admired their strong Christian marriage. Lord, this is I started, but I couldn't finish because it was too heartbreaking. "This is what most of American Christianity has become," Jesus said, and his voice was heavy with grief. "Performance, image management, emotional experiences that require nothing and change nothing. They come here once a week, sing songs about me, hear messages that make them feel good about themselves, and then they go back to their lives completely unchanged, and they think this is what I want. They think this is relationship." The scene shifted. Now I was watching the same church, but after the service, people were filing out, and I heard fragments of their conversations. That was such a powerful service. I felt so close to God today. Wasn't that worship incredible? But then I followed them out to the parking lot, and the transformation was immediate. A man who'd been in the front row, hands raised in worship, got cut off by another car and leaned on his horn, screaming profanities. A woman who'd been crying during worship was gossiping viciously about another church member before she even reached her vehicle. A youth leader was already on his phone, scrolling through social media, hungry for likes and validation. "They compartmentalize me," Jesus said. "I'm their Sunday experience, their emotional high, their weekly dose of inspiration, but I'm not their Lord. I'm not transforming their Monday mornings, their work ethics, their marriages, their secret thoughts, their hidden addictions, their actual lives. I'm a feeling they chase, not a master they follow." The vision shifted again, and now I was in a home, a nice suburban home with Christian decor everywhere, scripture plaques on the walls, a big, expensive Bible on the coffee table, family photos from their mission trip to Honduras prominently displayed. But as I watched this family's daily life, I saw the disconnect. The dad who had scripture plaques about patience was screaming at his kids over minor things. The mom who posted daily devotionals online was treating her overweight daughter with barely concealed disgust, constantly making comments about her body. The teenage son who led the youth worship team was secretly addicted to pornography and filled with shame, but too afraid to tell anyone because he had to maintain his good Christian kid image. "Do you see?" Jesus asked me. "They've learned to perform Christianity. They know the right words, the right activities, the right image. But they don't know me. They don't talk to me throughout their day. They don't hear my voice convicting them, guiding them, transforming them. They've turned their faith into a checklist. Go to church, check. Read Bible sometimes, check. Give money when it doesn't hurt too much, check. Post inspiring content, check. And they think this means they're saved, they're ready, they're mine." I was crying again because, how many times had I done exactly this? How many times had I performed Christianity while my actual heart was far from Him? The scene shifted once more, and this one hit even harder because it was so specific, so personal. I was watching a man in his late 40s, successful, respected, a deacon in his church. He'd been a Christian his whole life, could answer any theological question, had taught countless Bible studies. But I watched as, year after year, his heart grew harder. Not toward doctrine, he loved doctrine. Not toward church, he never missed. Not even toward studying scripture, he did that daily. His heart grew hard toward people. I watched him drive past homeless people without even seeing them. I watched him justify why he didn't need to help the single mom in his church who was struggling. I watched him gossip about other Christians under the guise of prayer requests. I watched him treat service workers with contempt. I watched him harbor racism he'd never admit to. I watched him value his political ideology more than Jesus' actual teachings. And every Sunday he raised his hands in worship. Every small group he had all the right answers. Every time someone asked if he was saved, he confidently testified about accepting Christ at age 7. But Jesus wasn't in his life. Not really. Jesus had become a theological concept, a political identity, a social club, a weekly ritual, but not Lord, not Master, not friend, not the one who was actively transforming him into someone who looked more like love every single day. When did it happen? I asked Jesus, my voice breaking. When did the gate close for him? It closed slowly, Jesus said. Every time he heard my voice, convicting him to change and chose comfort instead. Every time he felt my spirit prompting him to serve someone and chose convenience instead. Every time he had a chance to be transformed and chose to stay the same. The gate doesn't slam shut in one moment for most people, Jonathan. It closes gradually, inch by inch, as they choose religion over relationship, comfort over change, performance over transformation, until one day they can't hear my voice at all anymore. They're so insulated by their religious activity, so convinced they're right with me because they do all the Christian things, that they've become completely deaf to what I'm actually saying. The vision shifted again, faster now, showing me scene after scene. A prosperity preacher living in a mansion while people in his congregation struggled to pay rent, the gate closing. A worship leader who led thousands in song but was cheating on his wife, the gate closing. A missionary who counted conversions like trophies but never actually loved the people he served, the gate closing. A grandmother who'd attended church for 60 years but had never forgiven her sister and refused to reconcile, the gate closing. Stop, I finally said, because I couldn't take any more. Please, just stop. I get it. But Lord, this is everyone, who actually makes it? If all these people who look like Christians, who do Christian things, who believe Christian doctrine, if they're not actually ready, then who is? Jesus looked at me with such tenderness. Jonathan, you're asking the wrong question. You're still thinking about this in terms of who makes it, who's ready, who passes some test. But that's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for people who know me, who actually know me. But what does that even mean? I asked, and I was desperate now because everything I thought I understood was crumbling. He took my hand and said, "Come, I'll show you." Suddenly we were in a small apartment, tiny, maybe 500 square feet. A single mom was sitting at her kitchen table at 5 a.m., her Bible open, tears streaming down her face. She wasn't reading for a Bible study or to check off her devotional time. She was broken, desperate, talking to Jesus like he was actually there with her. "I don't know how to pay rent this month," she was whispering. "I don't know how to help my son who's struggling in school. I don't know how to heal from what my ex-husband did. I need you. I can't do this without you. Please, just tell me what to do. I'm listening. I'll do whatever you say." And I watched as peace settled over her. Not because her problems were solved, but because she felt his presence. Because she heard his voice not audibly, but that still, small voice in her spirit telling her she wasn't alone, guiding her next steps. "She knows me," Jesus said simply. "We talk every day, multiple times a day. She doesn't have theological degrees. She can't defend Calvinist versus Arminian doctrine. She doesn't have time to attend every church program. But she knows my voice, and she follows it. When I tell her to give her last $20 to help someone else, she does it. When I tell her to forgive someone who hurt her, she wrestles with it but ultimately obeys. When I convict her of sin, she repents, actually changes, not just feels bad. This is relationship, Jonathan. This is what I'm looking for." The scene changed. Now I was watching an elderly man in a nursing home. He couldn't get to church anymore, couldn't remember most scripture he'd once known, had dementia that was taking more of his mind every day. But I watched as the nurses would find him talking to someone they couldn't see, and there was such peace on his face. "We've walked together for 60 years, Jesus said, through his successes and failures, through his pride and his brokenness, through his certainty and his doubts. He knows my voice so well that even now, when his mind is failing, his spirit recognizes me. That's relationship. That's knowing me." Another scene, a businessman in his office, facing a decision that could cost him a promotion. He was praying, and I could hear his thoughts. "Lord, I know what you want me to do. I know you're telling me to be honest, even though it'll cost me. I know. You're asking me to choose integrity over advancement, and I hate it. I really hate it. But okay, I trust you more than I trust this career." "He doesn't always like what I ask," Jesus said, "but he listens. He obeys. We have real conversations where he argues with me, questions me, wrestles with me, but ultimately he knows my voice and he follows it, even when it costs him, especially when it costs him. That's the kind of relationship I'm looking for. I was seeing it now, the difference between religion and relationship, between knowing about Jesus and actually knowing Jesus, between performing Christianity and being transformed by Christ. "But Lord," I said, and this was the question that terrified me most, "how do we know? How do we know if we really know you, or if we're just fooling ourselves like all those people at the gates?" Jesus looked at me for a long moment, and I could see he was about to tell me something crucial, something that would either devastate me or set me free. "Tomorrow night," he said, "I'm going to give you the test, the actual test I use to determine who knows me and who just knows about me. It's not the test the church teaches. It's not the test you're expecting, but it's the only test that matters. And Jonathan, when I show it to you, you're going to have to decide, are you willing to take it honestly? Are you willing to see where you really stand?" And then he was gone. I was back in my trailer, alone, my heart pounding. The sun was starting to come up. Somehow hours had passed, and I had to be on set in 2 hours to play Jesus on camera. But how could I? How could I portray him when I wasn't even sure I really knew him? How could I speak his words when I might be one of those people at the gates, confident in my religious performance but deaf to his actual voice? I spent that whole day in a fog, going through the motions on set, but all I could think about was what Jesus had shown me, about the gates closing, about people's hearts growing hard, about the difference between knowing about him and actually knowing him. And I dreaded that night, because I knew he was coming back, and I knew he was going to show me the test, the real test, the one that would reveal whether my relationship with Jesus was genuine or just another religious performance. That night, I didn't even try to sleep. I just sat on my bed, waiting. At 2:17 a.m., I'll never forget the time Jesus appeared again, but this time, he looked different, more serious, more, I don't know, official, I guess, like a judge about to deliver a verdict. "Are you ready?" he asked me. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to be confident, but honestly, I was terrified. "I don't know," I whispered. "I don't know if I'm ready for what you're about to show me." "Good," he said, and there was actually approval in his voice. "At least you're being honest. That's more than most people give me." He sat down next to me again, and when he spoke, his voice was gentle but firm. "Jonathan, I'm about to show you the test, the one I actually use. Not the test the church has invented, not, did you say the sinner's prayer, not, do you believe the right doctrines, not, did you attend church and read your Bible. This is my test, the one that reveals who truly knows me, and who just knows about me." My hands were shaking. "Okay, show me." And then I was in another vision, but this one was different from the others. I was standing in a room. It reminded me of a courtroom, but gentler somehow. And there was a man standing before Jesus. I recognized him from the first vision, one of the pastors who'd been turned away at the gates. "I'm going to show you his test," Jesus said to me. "Watch carefully." Jesus looked at the pastor with such love, but also such authority. "Tell me about your life," he said simply. The pastor immediately launched into his resume. "Lord, I pastored for 38 years. I grew a church from 50 people to 15,000. I preached over 2,000 sermons. I baptized hundreds. I married couples, buried the dead, counseled the broken. I wrote 3 books about you. I appeared on Christian television. I raised millions for ministry. I led countless people to pray the prayer of salvation. I stop, Jesus said gently. I didn't ask about your ministry accomplishments. I asked about your life. Tell me about your actual life. The pastor looked confused. That is my life. Ministry is my life. Jesus leaned forward. Tell me about the man who cleaned your church building for 12 years. What was his name? The pastor's face went blank. I'm not sure. Miguel? No. Maybe Marcus? There were so many staff members. His name was Michael, Jesus said quietly. He had a daughter with special needs. His wife left him because she couldn't handle it. He worked 3 jobs to pay for his daughter's care, and cleaning your church was one of them. He came in at 5 a.m. every Tuesday and Thursday. You saw him hundreds of times. Did you ever once stop to ask him his story? To pray with him? To help him with his daughter's medical bills? The pastor stammered. Lord, I was busy building your kingdom. I had so many responsibilities. I couldn't personally know every staff member. So you didn't know him, Jesus said, and there was such sadness in his voice. But he knew me, because one of your associate pastors, the one you barely noticed because he wasn't charismatic or dynamic enough to be leadership material, that associate pastor sat with Michael every Tuesday morning before the church, opened, prayed with him, helped with his bills, loved him, and through that, associate pastor Michael encountered me, but you never even learned his name. Jesus paused, then asked, Tell me about your wife. My wife? The pastor looked even more confused. She's wonderful. She's been a great pastor's wife. She's led women's ministry for 20 years. She's always supported my vision. She's bowed. I didn't ask about her ministry role, Jesus interrupted. I asked about your wife. What was her deepest fear? Silence. What made her feel most loved? More silence. When did her mother die? And how did that grief change her? The pastor's face crumbled. I don't. We were so busy with ministry. There wasn't time for those kinds of conversations. We had a church to run. Jesus' expression broke my heart. She wept in bed beside you at least once a month for 15 years. You never noticed. She wrote in her journal about feeling like a ministry prop instead of a beloved wife. You never asked to read it. She developed anxiety and depression trying to keep up with the demands of being a pastor's wife while feeling utterly alone in her marriage. And you never saw it because you were too busy building your kingdom for me. But Lord, the pastor said, and he was crying now, I was doing it all for you. Everything was for you. Was it? Jesus asked, and his voice was so gentle but so devastating. Or was it for you? For your ego? For your legacy? For the feeling of being important, being admired, being successful? You preached about me, but did you ever actually listen to me? Did you hear me telling you to slow down, to prioritize people over programs, to love your wife, to notice the janitor, to care for the least of these instead of constantly pursuing the most impressive of these? Jesus turned to look at me then, even though I was just observing. This is the test, Jonathan. Not did you do ministry, not did you have correct theology, not did you achieve great things in my name. The test is, did you love? Did you actually love? The scene shifted. And now I was watching that same pastor, but years earlier. I saw him given a choice, spend time with his wife who was clearly struggling, or prepare for his big sermon series that would attract new members. He chose the sermon. I saw him walk past the janitor without seeing him, too focused on his own importance. I saw him prioritize the wealthy donors over the struggling single mothers in his congregation because the donors kept the church running. I saw him ignore. My voice, Jesus showed me this when the Spirit prompted him to simplify, to slow down, to focus on actually loving people rather than building an empire. He ignored it because the empire felt like success. Every time he chose his kingdom over my kingdom, Jesus said. Every time he chose his glory over my actual commands. Every time he chose impressive ministry over simple obedience, the gate closed a little more, until he could no longer hear my voice at all. Until he genuinely believed that building his church was the same thing as knowing me. I was shaking. Lord, what's the test? Please, just tell me clearly. What's the actual test? Jesus looked at me with such intensity. The test is Matthew 25. It's always been Matthew 25. I told you exactly what I would judge you on, but the church has spent 2,000 years explaining it away, spiritualizing it, making it about something else. But I meant what I said. And suddenly I was seeing it, Matthew 25. But not just the words. I was watching it play out. When I was hungry, did you feed me? When I was thirsty, did you give me drink? When I was a stranger, did you welcome me? When I was naked, did you clothe me? When I was sick, did you visit me? When I was in prison, did you come to me? That's the test, Jonathan. That's what I'm looking for. Not your theology, not your church attendance, not your ministry resume. Did you love the least of these? Because when you loved them, you loved me. And when you ignored them, you ignored me. It's that simple. It's that devastating. It's that beautiful. I watched as scene after scene played out. People who'd gone to church their whole lives but walked past hungry people without seeing them failed the test. People who knew every theological argument but never visited the sick or lonely failed the test. People who gave money to impressive ministries but ignored the struggling people right in front of them failed the test. But then I saw others. A teenager who used his allowance to buy food for homeless people passed the test. An elderly woman who spent her afternoons visiting the nursing home residents who never had visitors passed the test. A single dad who welcomed the refugee family into his community and helped them navigate their new life passed the test. But Lord, I said, and I was crying so hard I could barely speak, this means most of the church is failing. This means people who think they're saved, who are confident they're going to heaven, they're not ready at all. Yes, Jesus said simply. That's exactly what it means. Because they've been taught that salvation is about belief alone. But Jonathan, even demons believe, even demons have correct theology. What I'm looking for is love, transformative love. The kind of love that looks like action, the kind of love that costs you something, the kind of love that sees the least, the last, the lost, and says, I see you. You matter. Let me help. He showed me more. A woman who'd prayed the sinner's prayer at church camp when she was 13 and thought that was it. She was saved, nothing else required. She'd lived her whole life for herself, never sacrificing, never serving, never really loving anyone but her own family and close friends. At her judgment, Jesus showed her, moment after moment, when she'd had opportunities to help, to serve, to love, and she'd chosen comfort instead. I never knew you, he said to her. Not because she didn't know facts about him, but because she never actually knew him through loving others the way he loved. Then he showed me a man who'd struggled with faith his whole life, who'd doubted, who'd questioned, who probably couldn't have passed a theology exam. But this man had spent decades volunteering at a soup kitchen, had fostered difficult kids no one else wanted, had sat with dying patients at the hospital just so they wouldn't die alone, had lived a life of sacrificial love. Well done, good and faithful servant, Jesus said to him. You knew me because you loved the ones I love. You saw me in the least of these, and you served me there. I was completely broken now. Lord, I've been so blind. I play you on TV. I speak your words. And I've missed this. I've missed what you actually care about. Jesus turned to me, and his eyes were full of compassion. Jonathan, most of the church has missed it. They've turned faith into intellectual agreement. They've turned salvation into a transaction. They've turned Christianity into a Sunday morning experience and a political identity. But I'm calling all of them back to what I always said it was about. Love, not theoretical love, not theological love, actual, practical, costly, inconvenient, sacrificial love. He stood up, preparing to leave, but then turned back to me. Here's what I need you to understand. The gates close for people the moment they stop being willing to be transformed by me. The moment they think they've arrived, they're safe, they're good. The moment they value their comfort over my call to love. The moment they can walk past someone in need and justify it. The moment they can ignore my voice because it's inconvenient, that's when the gate closes. Not in some future end times event, but right now, today, in ordinary moments, when they choose themselves over the least of these. What do I do? I ask desperately. What do I tell people? How do we make sure the gate stays open for us? Jesus smiled then, and it was the first time I'd seen him smile in 3 nights of visions. You stay close to me. You listen for my voice. You let me transform you daily. You love people, actually love them, not just theoretically. You see the least of these, and you serve them like you're serving me, because you are serving me. And Jonathan, you stop performing Christianity and start living it. You stop worrying about looking like a good Christian and start actually being one. You stop building your kingdom and start building mine. He started to fade, but his voice remained. The test is simple. The test has always been simple. Did you love? That's it. Did you love me enough to let me transform you? Did you love others enough to actually sacrifice for them? Did you see me in the hungry, the thirsty, the stranger, the naked, the sick, the imprisoned, and did you serve me there? That's what I'm looking for. Not your doctrine, not your church attendance, not your ministry success, just love, real love, transformative love. The kind of love that proves you know me because you're becoming like me. And then he was gone. I sat there for a long time as the sun came up, just processing everything I'd seen. And I realized something that both terrified me and gave me hope. I still had time. The gate wasn't closed for me yet. It's not closed for you yet. We still have time to change, to actually listen to Jesus' voice, to love the way he's calling us to love, to stop performing and start transforming. But here's what you need to understand. Time is running out. Every day you choose comfort over obedience. Every time you walk past someone in need, every moment you ignore his voice, the gate closes a little more. Until you're like those people at heaven's gates, completely confident you're saved, totally convinced you've done everything right. But Jesus looks at you and says, I never knew you. So I'm asking you, I'm begging you, do the test. Look at your life honestly, not at your church attendance or your theological knowledge or your prayer list. Look at your life. When was the last time you fed someone who was hungry, gave drink to someone who was thirsty, welcomed a stranger, clothed someone in need, visited the sick, cared for the imprisoned or marginalized or forgotten? When was the last time you heard Jesus' voice telling you to do something inconvenient, something costly, something that would require you to sacrifice your comfort and you actually did it? Because that's the test, that's what he's looking for. Not perfect people, not people who never struggle or doubt, but people who know him well enough to recognize his voice and love him enough to obey it, even when it costs them everything. The gate is still open, but it won't stay open forever. Not because God is cruel or arbitrary, but because there comes a point when we've said no to his voice so many times that we can no longer hear it. There comes a point when we're so comfortable in our religious performance that transformation is no longer possible. Don't let that be you. Don't be the person standing at heaven's gates, confident in your salvation because you said the prayer and attended the church and believed the right things, only to hear those devastating words. I never knew you. Know him. Actually know him. Hear his voice and follow it. Love the least of these. Let him transform you into someone who looks more like love every single day. Because when those gates finally close, when that last moment comes, the only thing that will matter is whether you knew him, really knew him, loved him, followed him, served him by serving the least of these. And friend, if you're hearing this right now and feeling that conviction, that fear, that realization that you've been getting it wrong, that's not condemnation. That's an invitation. The gate is still open for you. Jesus is still calling. You still have time to develop a real relationship with him, to start hearing his voice, to start loving the way he's calling you to love. But don't wait. Don't assume you have unlimited time. Don't think you can coast on your past prayer or your church membership or your theological knowledge. Start today, right now. Ask him to show you where the gate has been closing in your heart. Ask him to help you hear his voice again. Ask him to give you eyes to see the least of these he's placing in your path. And then when he shows you, when he speaks, obey, even if it's costly, even if it's inconvenient, even if it requires sacrifice. Because that's what it means to know him. That's what keeps the gate open. That's what prepares you for the moment when he returns or when you stand before him. Not your performance, not your knowledge, just love. Real, transformative, sacrificial, obedient love. That's the test. That's always been the test. And now you know. So what are you going to do about it? If this message has shaken you, if you're realizing you need to make changes, tell me in the comments. Tell me what God is speaking to you right now. And let's pray for each other, because we're all in this together. We all need his grace. We all need his transformation. We all need to learn what it really means to know him. The gate is still open, friend, but it won't stay open forever. Choose wisely. Choose love. Choose him.